Geek Out! Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's a podcast about Superman. And we are back with episode 2. Me and Sam, the Superman sessions, as they are being called. This month, this episode is very exciting because we actually have a guest on. The whole point of the show in the first place was just to sit down and to talk to our friends about the Man of Steel himself and record it for all of time. And so the guy we have on this episode, we kind of talked a little bit about last time, is somebody Sam and I have known for about 4 years. I had the pleasure of working with him at the comic shop for a little while. And one of my favorite things is we would sit down on, like, usually Sundays. It was just the two of us. It was a shorter day, not as busy of a day. Everyone's getting ready to go back to school and work. And we close, earlier than the rest of the days, too. And we would just, as you would think, in a comic shop, talk about comics. And I think the best conversations are the ones that make you kind of see things differently. And we'd always kind of look at comic books and characters. And I think we came from kind of different backgrounds with characters. And Superman was the one we'd always talk about because I think he wasn't as aware of the character, and I'm just a nut job about him. So we talked about him a lot, but we talked about all different kinds of stuff. And he helped me see things differently and check out stories. I might have not done the same, and I think I might have done the same for him. And in the back of my mind, when we started doing this podcast, I knew this is someone I wanted to have on, and I was looking for the right thing to get him on for. And when I came up with this idea to do the Superman podcast, he was the first one I thought of for doing episode 1 of this show, and that is our good friend Vernon Miles. Vernon, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about a little bit last episode, but you do like the reporting thing, like for real, just like Clark Kent himself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I came from a small town in Virginia, worked on a farm for a while, and then came to the big city to do reporting. So every time I see that in a Superman story, it gets me a little bit giddy. Is
that something that, like, yeah, I mean, that's got to be pretty cool. Like, you guys share like this similar kind of thing. The idea of reporting is this kind of I think it's a really, really great kind of wonderful thing, this idea of like going out and I don't think expose is the right word, but going out and looking for the truth in things. That's got to be kind of cool, having that similarity with Clark Kent himself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And even early in the New 52, I know there's kind of a famous scene with Superman where he did like a speech about the morals of journalism, and as you're sitting there reading along to it as a reporter, I mean, it has that kind of special resonance there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was issue 13 of the New 52 where he quits, and I remember that was one of the issues where I really jumped back on to single issues of Superman, and I remember reading that same kind of thing and being like, oh my god, like, Superman's idea or Clark Kent's idea, and also the great thing is that, like, you're real, Clark Kent isn't, so like you're actually doing it, which is really cool. But yeah, I mean, that idea of taking journalism seriously, and it was at a time where he didn't like where it was going, and this idea of, I'm not going to write something I don't believe in. And I think that's something of the core of Superman that I think when people really get down to it, really resonate with. And I think that's something that I think hopefully people understand about the character.
Oh yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing with Superman, and seeing how him being a superhero and having those powers, involves his report that you're covering without disclosing that the guy you're writing about or taking pictures of is the superhero that you are. So
yeah. So let's kind of take it back a bit and kind of give us your basic kind of intro to not just Superman, but kind of just comics in general, and then kind of the road to where you first really remember seeing Superman and what that was all about for you.
Yeah, Superman was not a big part of my life early in comics. My first comic exposure was, I had some X-Men comics, and I grew up as a military kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. My family was always away, and my real support group was the X-Men. Uh-huh. And so that was my first family, and that was kind of my first friend group. And so that's what really got me into comics. It wasn't until I got to college that I started reading more stuff beyond that. And that's when I really started getting exposed to Superman. My first one was actually Red Sun.
Yeah.
Superman. Because I was obsessed with Russian politics, stuff like that. So as soon as I saw Superman with that big Soviet emblem across his chest, I was like, man, I gotta read that comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the first one I bought from that comic shop that we work at.
Oh,
That we
okay,
work
yeah, right
at.
on. Well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny because they've been talking about the idea of potentially making that into a movie. Um, and I know someone tweeted Mark Miller and was like, what are your thoughts about them turning your story into a movie? Like, who would you want to play Superman? He's like, I'd rather they just didn't make the movie.
Yeah,
um,
that's fair. I can't really see how that would make a really
yeah, I mean,
comprehensive
like,
movie.
is that the best move for DC cinematic universe right now? Is making Soviet Superman? I mean, I don't know if that's again, I like the story. I think it's a great story, but I don't think that's where they need to be going in terms of like DC movies right now.
Right. I mean, like I think Sam mentioned this on the last episode, but they haven't really made a good regular Superman movie. Let's
Yeah,
save the alternative universe takes on Superman, but until we really have a good grasp on what the core character is.
yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about kind of Superman in just media for you outside of comic books. Do you remember, watching the animated series? First time you saw the movies. What's your kind of take on Superman in kind of big and small screen?
Yeah, so Superman in the mass media didn't really catch on for me until even after I started rereading the Superman comics. It wasn't until I know Man of Steel was getting ready to come out, and some of those first trailers were showing, which looked, I mean, just spectacular to
Yeah.
me. Even still, if you go back and look at that stuff, it's almost more promising than some of the stuff in the movie.
Yes.
And so that was when I know my sister and I had watched some of the old Richard Donner movies, the first two. And I had liked it okay, but it was really watching my sister, who's not really a comic book person at all, get absolutely giddy about the character.
Oh yeah.
And just really start falling for some of those, just the earnestness of those stories. That gave me a very different perspective on Superman as a character, made me approach it from a different light.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Like that's something I think helps me get into certain movies or music or novels or whatever it is like seeing the passion of somebody else talk about it. Like if somebody likes something, that's great, but it's until I think you connect with it, whether you're connecting through someone else's experiences about the character, I think really helps. And it's funny you mentioned the Man of Steel trailers, because Sam and I have talked about it a lot, but like I've always joked that like I'm kind of like a born again Superman fan, because like I remember watching the Man of Steel trailer before The Dark Knight Rises, and it was the Jonathan Kent voiceover, the teaser, which has barely anything in it. It's
Right.
mostly just like Deadliest Catch Superman. Like it's really just a lot of like him on the boat, and kind of has like that really kind of haunting like single voice, kind of like a cappella thing. And he's got that line, which is a lot of it is taken from, is it from All Star Superman with Jonathan Kent, where he's kind of like, you're going to change the world. Is that from All Star?
I thought that was Man of Steel.
I'm trying to
Check.
remember. Oh no, I mean from Man of Steel the movie, but like they basically
No, I
pull
mean the
lines.
book Man of Steel.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember which one, because like, or is it?
I know the
Or is it- yeah.
Secret Origin by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank has the "But I am your son" exchange.
That's in there. Yeah, I thought that because you will stumble, you will fall, like all that kind of stuff. They have. I'm sorry, it's the Jor-El stuff. A lot of that is taken from the Jor-El voiceover is taken a lot from All Star Superman. So that's what it
Well,
was.
some of that's also from Mark Waid's run, because I know after the movie came out, he tweeted about seeing the lines that he wrote live
Sure.
action on the screen.
Yeah, like the birthright stuff.
Right.
Like especially him flying like over the animals and stuff like that. It's like taken pretty much straight from it. But yeah, I remember seeing the Jonathan Kent stuff and seeing Superman on the big screen again, and him just flying, like breaking all kinds of physics things. And it was before a Bat movie, and I'm going, God, like I haven't read Superman in so long. And when I was like 5 or 6, Superman was as real to me as anybody else in the world. Like it was. And it was the idea of just really from the basic standpoint of like, oh, he can fly, he's invulnerable, and he's the ultimate good guy, and the uniform really kind of, is a striking kind of thing. And then, I looked at it as like someone in their mid to late 20s, and I went out and bought a bunch of Superman comic books and kind of just binged on it hard. To the point where I had to like stop reading Superman for like a couple months, because like I read so much Superman, and it kind of blew my mind, because I think the big thing that I hope to explore like throughout this entire kind of Superman podcast is the first thing I think when you talk to a Superman, someone who doesn't read Superman, or even someone who reads Superman and knows him very well, I think one of the big criticism is that he's boring. And that is always an interesting thing because I think it's an easy trap to fall into, looking at Superman as potentially being a very boring character. And I think a lot of it is, I've always said that I think Superman to me is the most relatable superhero in comic books. I know a lot of people talk about, Batman and whatnot coming from like being an actual human. Sure. Yes, we are human like Bruce Wayne. But I think the thing that I come from with Superman is, and I remember like that was one of the fun things working at the shop is like people would come up to you and like ask you, oh, why read this or why do you like this character? And one of the things that I always kind of pitched with Superman is I was like, yeah, if you take away the fact that he crash landed onto a distant, a planet, that wasn't his own, and get rid of that. But the basic idea of that you're born and raised, hopefully, you're taught good life lessons with good parents, and I know that's not always the case, but if you're lucky enough to have that, you learn from those mistakes and you learn from the good and the bad of your young childhood days. You go to school, you discover your talents, whatever they may be, drawing, athlete, whatever, and you take those talents and you go and you try to make the world a better place. And if you break it down like that, I mean, that's basically the story of Superman, but you have throw in, the fact that he can fly, and he can lift up buildings and he can, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just an exaggerated look at kind of living your best life possible. Because, a lot of people talk about like he's not necessarily thrown into the situation of you have to become a superhero. And I love so many of the origin stories, like the Earth 1 story, the J. Michael Straczynski. He basically is like, he's going to find the thing that makes him the richest so he can give money to his mom. He has no intention of becoming a superhero. And then he sees, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane running into alien danger with no superpowers. And he's like, if they're doing it, why am I not doing it?
He also low-key in that book like solves the energy crisis, and nobody mentions it ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, like, he's a smart guy. I think a lot of like when it comes to like Batman, Superman stuff, a lot of it is Batman's the smartest and Superman is strong.
These are the punchline there, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that like Superman, like Clark goes to college. You know what I mean? Like Superman doesn't need to go to college, but he decides to, and he's a guy that he wants to see the world, but he sees the world from a different place than Bruce Wayne does. He wants, and also the idea of choosing the idea of being a reporter is being there and seeing the humanity of it. So
the thing you were saying about Superman being relatable, I mean, I think Superman is probably one of the most relatable superheroes to me. And I think because you have to, like you said, once you look past that initial surface of, oh, he's an alien from another world, no, he's got those powers. I remember there's one moment when you were showing me some of the Superman stuff to get me invested in it. And again, this is New 52. It's the scene where Superman goes around and the whole issue is him saving the day and he's punching robots and he's doing all that stuff. And then he gets back and he just can't wait to tell it to Lois Lane. And he's heading down the hallway to the apartment and he opens up the door and he's getting ready to tell her, and she is there in her apartment with some other guy that she was out on a date with. And she goes, "Oh, Clark, I'm a little busy. Can you come back later?" Stuff like that. And as Superman's walking away, his super-powered hearing allows him to hear inside that apartment as she's talking to this other guy, and he's like, "Oh, that guy has a crush on you." And she goes, "Oh, no, him? We're just friends."
Yeah.
And the doors close on him, and that's it. And I think that's something that's so shockingly relating that you probably would never get in a Batman book. It's the idea that you have somebody who you think you are, somebody who your self idea, not being able to project that, not being able to show that to the people around you. And I think that's such an incredibly relatable trait with Superman.
Yeah, I mean that moment's from the end of issue 1
by George Perez.
Of the New 52 Superman. And it's such a, and it's funny for, I'm such a fan of small moments in comic books and just storytelling and movies in general. And for someone as big as Superman, I think those small moments resonate so well.
That's my favorite moment in the beginning of Superman 2, the Richard Donner one, where he's getting ready, he's in the room and Lois Lane's in the other part of the room, and he's saying, "Lois, I'm Superman." And he's just getting ready, and then she walks in the room, and he like crumples down again. I mean, who hasn't been there? Who hasn't?
Oh, that
been?
yeah, that moment of confidence that you're gonna do, you're gonna say this thing or do this thing, and then reality strikes, and you just crumble back into Clark Kent.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody prepares for, what they're going to say and how they're going to present themselves, and they, get into that situation, and it's very different. It doesn't matter, how much you can fly or punch through walls. I mean, that's so human, and that's such a very human trait. I was doing that getting like 5 minutes ago, getting ready for this podcast. I mean, like everybody has that.
Yeah.
I think at its core, Superman, Clark is just this guy from Kansas that comes to the big city because he thinks he can be his best true self there, and his best true self just happens to be the greatest superhero the world has ever known.
Yeah. And that's something, too, I always enjoyed with the John Byrne stuff, is that he becomes, like, I think it's a little bit more complicated. Like, with Batman, it's, they talk about the mask that Bruce Wayne wears, and the mask is Bruce Wayne, and Batman is the real face. And with Superman, I think I'm always interested in how people think they look at Clark Kent that way. I mean, I think in the John Byrne stuff, he had no intention of creating the character of Superman. Clark Kent was like, this shuttle is, I always love that too. Like the shuttle or the plane falling kind of becomes his coming of age like moment where that's where he becomes Superman. Smallville also does it too with the tornado. And Superman for All Seasons, the tornado kind of being the pinnacle of his young life to going from
Man of Steel too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The tornado being that thing. Superman Returns, of course, does it so well with the plane. I still think we've said it a million times before, being one of the best moments I think in a Superman movie of showing his potential. Yeah, his potential, his strengths, his feats that he can accomplish.
Well, I think for me, I think the defining moment for that one is the Richard Donner, the first Superman movie where he's going up the hill, he's racing his dad. Because I don't think Superman is just about his strengths. I think it's about, it's not just about learning how to use your strengths, but learning how to cope with your weaknesses.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so him running up that hill and his dad running up behind him, and then his dad having that heart attack. I mean, and all of that shown completely silently from a distance. And then we just cut to the next scene. I mean, that's so, again, that's heartbreakingly relatable. And I think that really shows the emotional core of Superman there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's become such, I think, as many times as I've watched the original Superman Donner movie, that moment of him with his dad and his dad letting out that kind of, that horribly, almost pathetic sounding "oh no" as he realizes that's, he's having this heart attack, and Clark as this young man who can do anything, but he can't stop a heart attack, and like that is, I think that's something why people didn't really like the death of Jonathan Kent in Man of Steel, because he could have stopped that from happening. Where a heart attack is something that doesn't matter if you're Superman, you can't stop a heart attack. And something too is like, again, it's like I like that this has kind of become like about the how relatable Superman is in talking about this. I've mentioned it before, but my all-time favorite scene now in the Richard Donner Superman movie is the goodbye between him and his mom in the fields of Kansas, where it's so smart because Richard Donner uses his surroundings and Mother Nature to make that scene just look absolutely astounding. You know what I mean? Like there's not a soul in sight. It's just the two of them in the fields in Kansas. And of course you get John Williams' score, but you get that moment where, Superman, Clark's mom has to say goodbye to her son. And, that idea of giving, your son going to college, your son going to, whatever. But it's this grand scale of everybody's going to love my son. And he's no longer just my son. He's going to become, the world's favorite superhero. And that idea of having to say goodbye and that kind of like the way the camera pans back with the music and kind of just the mom and Clark standing there embraced is such a great moment. And again, just ticking that box of, relatability of parents and growing up is really interesting.
Yeah, anything where Superman goes back to Smallville. I mean, obviously there's scenes that should be used sparingly, but I remember in Identity Crisis, I think there's a scene where he goes back to Smallville. I don't remember the exact content of it, but I mean, I think that's the one where it's Superman for All Seasons where he says, "Nice suit, thanks. My mom made it."
Yeah, yeah. You always love when like he doesn't he never forgets where he comes from.
Oh,
And
exactly. Yeah.
you know that idea of, and I think I've been misremembering the quote for all of eternity with Smallville, and I'll probably misremember it again. But the basic, and spoilers for Smallville, but in the finale of Smallville, Clark goes to the Fortress of Solitude, in his like tuxedo suit, and the world is going to shit. Darkseid is taking over. Their hope is being lost all around the world, and the suit, it's basically the Superman Return suit, is introduced. I think in the finale of 10 or the finale of 9, or very early on. His mom makes him the Superman Return suit, and he goes to grab the suit, and when he goes, it's not there, and his dad is there, and Pa Kent had died earlier on in the series in a pretty heartbreaking episode. I think one of the better representations of that in the big or small screen. And I can't remember the exact line because I always remember it being, he turns to his son and says, "Remember Smallville." And I don't think that's the line, but it's basically that's what it is. It's like always remember Smallville and never forget Smallville.
Yeah, well, that's why he turns to his son and he says, "Somebody save me."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's and he starts singing the title track.
I always like that Smallville, like the show, outlasted the band that wrote that song. Like, they broke up, I think, before Smallville ended. Also, the fact that they play like the dance, the school dance at the end of season 1. But yeah, this idea of like father handing over the Superman suit and basically saying, "Remember where you came from," and that kind of sums up the point of that show, Smallville, so well. I mean, I'll probably all throughout this podcast talk about how much I love that show, and I really do. Like, it's on Hulu if anyone has Hulu. That's the best way to watch it now, unless if you don't have it on physical, DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. And yeah, like you said, it doesn't need to be 10 seasons long, and it suffers from like not shows like Arrow and The Flash and Supergirl and even like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They kind of have Smallville to thank for the pros and the cons of what to do in kind of superhero TV. And I think when Smallville really gets it right, it's still one of the best superhero anythings. Like for me, Tom Welling is my favorite actor to play Superman. I think he embodies it so well. He embodies that the Smallville Clark so well, but also you buy him as Superman, even though he never really puts the suit on the entire series. Even in that final episode, because at the end of the day, that's not really what that show was about. Because Tom Welling actually came out with an interview recently, because he's on the show Lucifer now, where he basically talks about the whole point of Smallville, and he was offered a part on Supergirl. I don't know what they were going to do, if they were going to do like the Shattered Dimensions Smallville universe, but he turned it down because he's like, like I'm older, and we had our fun, and as much as I would have loved it, I agree. It makes sense now. And we got Tyler Hoechlin, who I think is a really great Superman. Have you seen any of the Tyler Hoechlin Superman stuff?
I haven't seen any of Supergirl yet.
I think you could probably just watch the first 2 episodes, because he's in the first 2 episodes, and I haven't finished season 2. I don't know if, Sam, if you finished season 2 of
I have, yeah.
Supergirl, but I know he shows up again. But he is pretty damn great as Superman.
He's fantastic, yeah, and he shows up towards the end of the season too.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I've heard. I mean, I'm just excited. People are excited to watch Superman again.
And the line, by the way, Jake, so you can keep your mind from wandering.
Yes.
Always hold on to Smallville.
Always hold on to Smallville. Thank you. Yeah, for years after I finished it, I thought I was Remember Smallville, but always hold on to Smallville, which is so fucking great. Like, his mentor figure, his dad, is handing over the suit, so that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So what?
There's something you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
No, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Yeah, there's something you mentioned earlier, which is people saying that Superman's a boring character, and I think the biggest criticism I hear there is if he's invincible essentially. Mm-hmm. But I think that really something I wanted to mention after you said that is I think it really is a lack of. I don't want to offend anybody who feels that way. But that's sort of a lack of imagination to me. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more weaknesses. I think there's a lot more challenges that characters can face than just dying.
Sure, yeah.
And I think Superman would not have lasted 100 years, or almost what is it, 75? I don't know how many years.
Almost
Superman's
80.
Yeah. He's he turned 75 in like 2014.
2013?
No,
Right, yeah.
it'd be 13. Yeah.
13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. 13, 14. the people. I mean, there's so many just objectively good Superman stories. I mean, that it really shows that there are challenges you can present this character with beyond just is he going to live to the end of the issue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's something. I'm glad you reminded me of that, and you reminded me earlier in our talk. Like, one of the things that I think makes him really interesting that you focus on, and Grant Morrison talks about this a lot too,
right.
being one of the the great Superman writers, is you focus on what he can't do.
Yeah.
And you focus on who he can't save.
Yeah.
And
there's a great moment in Last Son of Krypton where he's got a kid with him, and spoilers for Last Son of Krypton, where, he just spends the whole time bonding with this kid, and then at the end the kid has to, like, go away, and Superman's like, I can save you, and the kid's like, no, you can't, I'm sorry, you have to let go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's when you focus on that,
right.
And you don't focus on it all the time. Like, sure, it's fun to see Superman uppercut Doomsday onto the moon and pound him in the dust. Yes, that's great.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I do love that. But I think, guys like Jeff Johns, like, I don't know if you've read Jeff Johns' New 52 Superman, but there's some really interesting stuff in there. Like, he talks about what does Superman dream of? And I was like, oh, fuck, like, what? I've never thought, I mean, this is why I don't write Superman, but I was like, what the hell? Like, and he tells this moment of, like, every night he has this reoccurring dream where he's on Krypton, it hasn't exploded, and the world starts to explode, like it's going to, and he rips open his shirt, and there's no Superman logo underneath. And he wakes up. And, this idea of, what does the world's greatest superhero think of? Or what does he dream of, And, so I like that, I like the idea of focusing on, his limitations as being one of his greatest one of his greatest weaknesses. Like, I know Henry Cavill, who I love that he's read so much Superman stuff, and he really takes the character seriously, especially with kids. Is he always said that it's not kryptonite, it's Superman. That's Superman's greatest weakness. Is like you're gonna have that doubt, because what's gonna affect you more when, like, you can save you technically. When you put it all down, you should have the powers to save everybody because you're faster than this, you're stronger than this. But that idea of, like, when that earthquake hits on the other side of the world and you can't be there. I mean, I think there's a Kurt Busiek story where he talks about that. He's like, somebody keeps putting themselves in danger so Superman can come save them. And I think it's a woman, and he's like, you can't keep, like, I can't be your personal, like, bodyguard. Like, you can't keep doing this. Like, I'll be there to help you when I can. But one day, I'm going to be somewhere else, and I can't be a personal bodyguard to somebody and not being able to save everybody. I don't know. I think that's something where, like, I didn't even really think about that till later, like, the more I've read the character and really dove into him,
Yeah, and I think even kind of going back to my roots with the character, going back to, like, Superman Red Son, where the kind of central idea is what does Superman do to people's sense of self-responsibility? I think Lex Luthor calls him out at that. Some people aren't afraid to walk across train tracks because Superman's just going to come by and stop the train. And there's a lot of interesting questions there, and that's why I think on average, like, if you look at the average Batman story is probably, I would say, better than the average Superman story.
Yeah. But
when you look at, like, the greats, I can think of maybe on one hand the number of truly great Batman stories.
Aww.
But I would, yeah, I know. We're gonna get hate mail for this one, but I can easily think of 10 great Superman stories, and I think it's because it challenges writers to think outside of normal conventions of normal genres, because he's not really a genre character. He's Superman.
I think the weakest thing that DC did is put him in as part of a broader continuity, instead of having him be, like, the only superhero. Like, suddenly, because theoretically Superman could solve something like Gotham. Suddenly if Captain Marvel exists, suddenly Superman isn't, the indisputably strongest figure in the world anymore.
Yeah.
Sure, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, that's the trade-off there, is it doesn't make sense that there's issues like Long Halloween where Batman should just call up Superman and go, hey, Superman, who's this bad guy? Superman's like, oh, okay, give me 1 minute. He comes back a minute later, like, oh, it's this guy. Like, yeah, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, I feel like some of the best Superman moments are some of his interactions with those other heroes. I mean, we talk about Superman in other media. Superman in Justice League, where he's dealing with, like, Shazam, And it's not just Superman's interactions with Shazam, but Shazam's interactions with Superman, where Shazam's like, you're my hero, you're my idol, and then you do something where you screw up and I don't agree with you, and it forces me to confront my idea of what being a hero really means. And I think you gain a lot more from seeing Superman interact with those other characters than you lose in your suspension of disbelief.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's certainly, especially when you're kind of contrasting. That is the benefit of a shared universe, because,
Right.
With any shared universe, seeing how Captain America would interact with someone like Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something that is taken away at the same time. There is a give and take there.
I love that episode you're referring to, the Justice League episode where Shazam and Superman fight.
Right.
And yeah, he kind of puts Superman on notice. And Shazam is one of those characters, like, I always loved when like kids would come into the shop and be like, they'd like run up to you and be like, Hulk for Superman, who wins? And like, because they'd see us as like, because we work in a comic shop, we have like some authority or some kind of like
right.
Inside scoop on it. Yeah,
comic knowledge,
yeah. And one of the characters I always think could beat Superman in a knockdown fight would be Shazam. And what I always like talking about like favorite moments in books. I think one of the greatest fights between two characters, I love Superman and Shazam in Kingdom Come.
Right.
And there's that great, like, I guess the end of one of the issues where he turns into Shazam for the first time in, like, 30 years or whatever.
Well, that's right. Cause he's always Billy Batson.
He's old Billy Batson because, and he's got,
controlled with the Mr. Mindworms.
Yeah. And he turns into Shazam. He's got that, like, cheese ball look on his face. And it's like...
perpetually stuck in the 50s.
Yeah, and he's kind of got that look, and everyone's like, oh, fuck. Because Superman doesn't do well against magic. And it's, again, Superman inspires greatness in other characters. And I think that's one of the missteps of and I don't want to just be down on the new DC movies, because there's some stuff I really like in Man of Steel, Superman-wise. And I think Cavill has the potential to put in the best Superman performance and be the best Superman when he's given the best, good material to work with. Because
I'm willing to give him benefit of the doubt there.
Yeah.
Even though he's 2 movies in.
Yeah, I know. But but I think the thing is, like, the thing that always left me scratching my head with Batman v Superman was the whole point was like Superman inspires everyone to be better, but nobody fucking likes Superman in Batman v Superman.
Right, yeah.
And so it doesn't feel earned. Like when he dies, it's not like people suddenly are like, oh yeah, well, good. I'm glad that he stopped that from happening.
Well, of course, because that makes sense. Because with Man of Steel, you get this like nihilistic, objectivist Clark or Pa Kent, where he's like, maybe you shouldn't save people. Maybe, hey, Superman, have you read Atlas Shrugged? Like, I think it's, I don't know. It's internally consistent, but it's still bad.
Yeah, and one of the things I remember, we all volunteer and at the Image booth, and we're all at San Diego, and like this past San Diego Comic-Con, and I remember like the Justice League trailer dropped, like the newer one, and I was like watching in my hotel room, and it took me forever because the Wi-Fi, everyone was on the internet, and it took me like forever to watch this 4-minute trailer, and we were talking about it afterwards, and there's this moment where like Batman gives this like speech about Superman. And I remember like watching it being like, I agree with everything you say, but we have not seen any of that in any of these DC movies. You know what I mean?
He watches the Justice League cartoons, actually. That's what he's referring to.
Yeah. There's no way for Bruce to reach that conclusion.
Absolutely not.
Right, yeah.
So, anyway, but what I was going to say is, like, I love that, Superman inspires goodness in people. And one of my all-time favorite moments, and if I would just post the panel on Facebook, I did it once. It's a kind of unremarkable panel. I mean, it's Alex Ross painting it, which is gorgeous, but all it is a boot being grabbed by somebody. But it's like, I think one of the most powerful moments in comics, where again, spoilers for Kingdom Come, but they released this bomb to kill all the heroes.
Yeah.
And this bomb is coming, and Superman kind of basically like lectures Shazam as he's Billy Batson again. I think he turns back into Billy Batson, and he's like, "Look, I gotta."
Because he covers his
mouth. He covers his mouth. Yeah, he's like, "I gotta clean up your mess now. I gotta go stop this nuclear bomb from coming from your guy Lex Luthor. That's gonna kill all of us." and he goes, "Stay right here and don't."
It's the UN.
Oh, the UN. That's right. He's like,
Yeah.
"Don't say another word."
Well, no, he's like, Billy, you're the only one who walks between both worlds, both mortal and superhero. You get to decide.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to try to do this.
Yeah.
It's up to you if you're going to stop me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he goes to fly, and you see him grab his boot,
So you think he might be trying to stop him?
and he throws him back on the ground and flies and sacrifices himself. And that is like one of my all-time favorite moments because
that's so true.
it's,
Yeah.
Shazam gets, and Kingdom Come is a great kind of like Justice League older story, but at the end of the day, it really is a Superman story. You get the great moment with Wonder Woman giving him his glasses back at the end.
Restoring his connection to humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really think Kingdom Come really answers a lot of the other criticism you hear of Superman that we hear a lot, which is, oh, well, he's too good, he's too noble. And I think the whole point of Kingdom Come is that there is a point for that. Of course, we all love like the morally ambiguous characters like Daredevil or Punisher, but there is a place for a character in comic books who isn't that moral ambiguity, who is a sense of uprightness and truth, justice in the American way.
Yeah, he's still teaching Billy a lesson in the face of certain death, and Billy makes, the right choice.
Well, and the idea, like Mark and Alex Wade and Alex Ross's idea behind creating Kingdom Come is like, keep in mind that series like debuted in '97. Image has been around for 5 years, as have like characters like Deadpool and that sort of thing, and Cable.
Right.
And at that time, Image isn't like the art house comic book publisher. It's like the extreme comic book publisher.
Yeah,
You've got
absolutely.
like Youngblood and Spawn and Savage Dragon and all that, and Cyberforce. And all
it's not the wonderful Image that we all know and love today. Thank you, trademark Image.
I think I compared them online earlier to like the comic book equivalent of like Miramax and like A24 Studios.
Yeah.
Right.
Where like
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah. And it was kind of a reaction to that. It's like, are these characters, like specifically Superman, outdated like in this age of extreme comic book heroes? And they were like, no. You can still like, that's why you have like the anti-heroes as the younger generation and the older generation being like, step back, Sonny. This is how we do it.
Yeah, that's so fucking great. When he cleans up all the the younger superheroes mess, there's that like iconic, Alex Ross painting of him just holding all this young whippersnappers by their belts.
Yeah.
I mean,
you were talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're talking about Wonder Woman there. We're talking about Shazam in there, and I heard you mention as we were coming on that some of the best moments are when people actually really disagree on stuff. And the more I think about that, God, Sam, I really disagree because I really think Superman should have peers. I think he should have people that he works and interacts with who are also superheroes, because so many of the great moments that I'm now thinking back to about Superman are those scenes where he either agrees or disagrees with people, or he's like teaching or being taught by others. I mean, yeah.
I think I obviously I've loved Justice League stories with, where Superman's mixing with other people. One of my favorite Superman stories is him basically leading the Justice League. I really like the Dan Jurgens story, Panic in the Sky, where he basically unites the heroes of Earth against like Mongol and all that. That's a really great fucking story. Or is it? No, it's Brainiac. But that's right. I think Brainiac takes over Warworld or something like that. And it's one of my stories, and I don't know like all.
Well, dude, like you said, like, this is me like trying to remember. Like I couldn't remember exactly how Smallville ended. I couldn't exactly remember how Kingdom Come went. It's just like I'm remembering things so differently.
Yeah, there's clearly, obviously, there's great stories with Superman with other superheroes, but if you're trying to make, there are sacrifices that come with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I was a little too harsh, and I was like, the worst thing they did.
How fucking dare you?
How dare you?
Well, no, one of the things I want to ask everybody, just as a thing I think is interesting, is like, what is your ideal relationship between Batman and Superman? Because I think that is one of my favorite things in comics, is seeing their relationship. And it's funny because I kind of go all different ways sometimes. Like sometimes I do, like I love, Frank Miller being one of my favorite just people in comics, writing and drawing, and his way is very harsh from Batman's point of view. He is very belittling of Superman through Batman's eyes. But how do you? And I think we've talked about it before, but just to get it on kind of on mic here, like how do you see their relationship? Like, what is your ideal Batman Superman relationship?
Sure. I think there's a happy medium between the two extremes you usually see Superman and Batman like created as. You have the Dark Knight Returns, which is a great story, and it's very much Superman versus Batman. And then you have the other like sort of average Justice League story where they're super friends. Mm-hmm. I think that you can't get past the fact that Superman and Batman are two very different people with similar but altered backgrounds who approach dealing with justice in very different ways. And yet, at the same time, I think the ultimate lesson of Superman is they have so much to teach each other. They have so much of a perspective to share with each other that makes them more complete and even better as individual heroes. I like the idea that Superman is a better superhero for Batman being his friend, despite whatever their differences might be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that should be a complex friendship.
Yeah, I mean, at the time of this recording, the Dark Knight Metal #1 came out, and I won't say anything spoiler about it.
Voltron.
But there's a couple there's like one or two little moments between Bruce and Clark that are really kind of like great. One of them being Bruce kind of shutting down Clark, like I wasn't talking to you. But another one is the two of them have this kind of like whisper thing where they're like, oh shit, blah blah blah, and like I agree with you, Vernon. Where like it is I like it that it's complicated, and I like one of my favorite things is the tiny little moments where Bruce drops the facade, not the facade because he is Batman, like that's more of what his thing is, but drops that armor a little bit to let Clark in, and I think. That's something you can't have happen all the time. You can't have it in every issue. You can't have it in every kind of other panel. But that, remember when they did those selfie variants? I don't know I can't remember if you were working at the shop or not when that.
I was.
Going. Okay.
Yeah, I remember the one where like Alfred puts on the Batman mask. I think it's one where like Superman is making Batman smile, maybe.
Yeah, and like that, like it's kind of goofy, but that kind of sums it up, in a very like easy, quick to see kind of way where like he's making Batman smile, and I know Sam and I have recreated that drunkenly once at Old Shabine on one of our birthdays. But again, I'm always fascinated in the relationship between Batman and Superman because they are just polar opposites, but I think they help ground each other in that way as well. And that's something, like I said, I like when they have those tiny little cracks. I also like when, like, in Hush, I know is a moment a lot of people reference where Batman and Superman fight, and Batman is
and I think everybody forgets this. Like, Superman's being mind controlled.
Yeah, he was being mind controlled, but also, like, Bruce knows Clark better than anybody else, which is how he gets out of that situation. Yeah. Granted, he puts Lois in peril, but he knows that Lois will be saved by Clark, because it doesn't matter how brainwashed somebody, Clark is. That
he knows he's holding back.
He also knows he's holding back too, and so
he says as much. He's like, if he really wanted to, he could kill me in a second.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But like I said, the story of the boot crushing an ant is not that interesting. What's more interesting is the ant standing up to the boot, and so that's why I think from a story writing standpoint, a lot of times it wouldn't be as interesting to see Superman beat Batman in one panel.
Yeah.
So, well, Vernon, you got anything else, man? We kind of we've been talking.
No, I mean that's fantastic. I think we hit a lot of the high points. I definitely think what was Kingdom Come, All Star Superman. I mean, those are really two of the greats. And I think if somebody were to try and learn, well, I would not recommend you start with either of those. Actually, I think both of those require sort of an understanding of a basic understanding of the character.
Yeah, and with Kingdom Come, a basic understanding of the DCU.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do throw like actual literal Hawkman.
Yeah,
at
Captain
you.
Comet is in fucking Kingdom Come.
Those are terrible recommendations now that I think about it for people who's new.
Also, I mean, also Superman is like one of the most like heady, like mind crazy,
high concept,
but it's good. It's good.
Yeah, I didn't get All-Star Superman the first time I read it, and then I watched the animated TV show or the animated movie, and I was like, oh, this is like way better than the comic. And then I actually like understood what the comic was about and understood Grant Morrison. Because really, All-Star Superman requires more of an understanding of Grant Morrison than it does require an understanding of Superman.
Yeah. What would you like? I know you already said Kingdom Come and All-Star, but what just going out, kind of your favorite. Do you have a favorite Superman movie or like big screen, small screen thing, like animated or whatever?
There's been a couple really good Superman movies, but I think the best Superman movie is the Disney Hercules movie. Wow. I was thinking about that as I listened to the podcast and you guys were talking about it. You were like, there's not one movie that really puts together all of the good qualities from the Richard Donner movies without any of the weaknesses. That's it. They're going, God, Disney's Hercules does exactly all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's so clearly Richard Donner inspired.
Yeah. It's funny because like so much of the best Superman movies, people always joke, but it's not even really a joke anymore. Is like I hear Hercules and I also hear the Iron Giant. Like
Iron Giant, yeah, that's completely, yeah.
So yeah,
and I haven't watched it, but I hear Midnight. What is it called? Midnight Run, Midnight
in Paris.
Yeah, no.
Yes, Midnight in Paris. Such a good Superman movie. With Michael Shannon. Midnight Special.
Yeah.
I hear Midnight Special is a really good Superman type story about a kid who has powers, and Michael Shannon plays basically a Pa Kent character who has to like figure out how you cope with that as an adult. So it's a Superman story from Pa Kent's perspective.
Jake, how do you feel about Midnight Special?
See, I agree with all of that before I saw it. Then I saw it and I didn't like it very much. No, but like I said, that I think there are elements of that. I think it's a much more realistic, like the panic and terror of having that. It's an interesting movie, but yeah, like Superior by Mark Miller. Like I love that comic book. It's not technically a Superman comic book, but it
Vernon, what do you think of Superior?
Well, Mark Miller, if you're listening to this, I love all your stuff.
Oh hell yeah! If Mark Miller's listening to this, we fucking made it.
Yeah, Netflix money.
Yeah. But yeah, Superior is like basically Shazam meets Richard Donner Superman. But anyway,
which is one of Mark Miller's favorite films.
Oh, the end of Superior is the end of the first Richard Donner Superman. He fucking winks at you while flying above the earth. Sorry for ruining that.
The first Richard Donner Superman movie is good.
Fair enough.
Which is all I'll say about that.
Fair enough. So anyway, no. So I like the idea of you. You gave us any other Superman recommended reading you would give to anyone listening who's like, man, I like this guy Vernon. I like his style. I want to know what his Superman stories I should read are.
Yeah, well, first you should read the stuff I write, which is journalism. But other than that, no, really, Last Son of Krypton I think is one of the really underrated Superman stories. It's by Geoff Johns, and it's about Superman and Lois Lane basically adopting a kid. It's kind of like Superman figuring out how to be adults and how to sort of put themselves in the same position that he faced as basically another Pa Kent. It's how does Clark Kent fare as Pa Kent?
Right on, man.
Yeah, I think it's a really good Superman story.
The Brainiac story is my favorite.
It's very good, yeah.
Oh yeah, Brainiac,
Frank,
great. Yeah, and some influences there on Man of Steel.
Yeah,
the first one. Yeah, there's a fight at the end of that where I think it's where Brainiac can't adjust to all of the sensations and stuff of Earth. Mm-hmm. And then that's they copy that basically like panel for panel at the end of Man of Steel.
Well, Is there anything you want to let the audience know? Like read anything? I know you do some stuff for the Image magazine, Image Plus.
Yeah, I was gonna say Image Plus. Check it out. So yeah, that's the big one. Right and I can't wait to keep listening to more of this show.
Yeah, man. Like I said, there's really. This is the cool thing about these is like we could kind of do whatever we want. So, down the line, love to have you on again. Maybe post Justice League we can talk because I love I think I love your reviews of movies and you hate them more than when you love them.
Well, there's a lot to choose from. So.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk post Justice League and talk about just superheroes in general. Like I said, I really
just watching that Justice League trailer so many times. Like every time I watch the Black Panther trailer, the Thor Ragnarok, I get more excited for it. And every time I watch the Justice League trailer come up on a movie screen, I just get terrified.
Yeah, I think we're kind of, we kind of, I don't know, we kind of know what to expect.
Right. Yeah.
But
I don't know, because Wonder Woman gave me hope. I enjoyed Wonder Woman.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I think it started to steer things in the right direction. I think DC knows what they have, and they're going to use their strengths, hopefully. And, like I said, we were talking to someone earlier, like Joss Whedon gets to play with the Avengers and the Justice League. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm Sam and I, we're there freaking opening night like always. I mean, it's the Justice League. I mean, it'll be exciting to see, to see those guys in action. So,
absolutely.
Well, anyway, Vernon, again, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to get and get to talk to you on one of these, man. And
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely,
anytime.
And
all right,
we will be back next episode with another friend of the podcast, someone we've talked to before, and we definitely dig her take on Superman Returns in particular.
Oh, me especially, yeah.
Yes. So anyway, thanks for listening, kids, and have a good night. We'll be back next month with more crazy shenanigans.
Up and away. Bum 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 bum. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday, and you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.